Welcome to Regulate This, a really unfiltered podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to Regulate This, a really, or should I say R-I-A-ly, unfiltered podcast. We navigate the complex world of compliance and your business. I am your host, Leila Shaver, and I'm here with my co-host, Tracie Bear.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be here and share more information and tips with you.
We are excited. So whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is here for you to inform and empower you on your journey through the industry. So today, what are we talking about? We are talking about talking clients off the ledge. Right? Strategies for handling market turbulence. And I don't know, Tracie, have you looked at the markets recently? Have we had market turbulence?
Yep. I can't even give you anything more clever than that because it's been somewhat of a roller coaster, and I think it's been unpredictable for people. And when it's unpredictable for the advisors, you can only imagine how it makes their clients feel, right? They see their retirement or their nest egg moving in ways that they didn't hope for or anticipate. They see volatility, they see ups and downs. They sometimes want to pull out early and then find out that, oh my gosh, I should have stayed in. They do panicking activities and panic emotions that set them into a tailspin sometimes. So what are we going to do about this? How do we deal with people that are in a free fall of temporary insanity from the fear that something may or may not happen, and they're sure that whatever it is, it's going to fall in their lap?
Well, and we have to consider too, not just the fear, but where is it impacting an advisor's clients, right? So we talk about, and I'm going to say this is not a political statement, I'm just talking facts, right? So we have these tariffs that have increased. We're seeing that now where companies are coming out and saying, hey, we're going to have to increase pricing. We've seen it with Walmart. We've seen it with a few different car manufacturers where they're saying these tariffs have had a real impact. They're going to have to increase pricing. I remember Easter when the price of eggs had skyrocketed. And it was like, how are we going to dye eggs? Because it's so expensive to go buy eggs to go dye them, which presented an opportunity for a marshmallow company that said, hey, let's dye marshmallows this Easter instead of eggs. But, you're really seeing this circumstance in this environment where the everyday person is really being hit hard in the wallet. And we're seeing, less spending in the retail space. We're seeing cost of groceries has gone up. Just looking the last few years with inflation having increased, and it kind of dropped off. But then we've seen some of it starting to tick back up again. Interest rates, we were hoping to decrease. And now we're seeing that they've kind of stayed and they may potentially increase in the future. So all of this is creating fear and uncertainty, and ultimately that is why markets go up and down, because it's essentially a fear-based index. How fearful or how hopeful are investors? So when there's so much change happening, investors are feeling it, they're nervous, and it's hard to deal with, especially after we've had such a long period of growth in our country. So now dealing with this turbulence is hard. So now let's talk about, now that we've kind of set the scene of what the everyday kind of retail investor is dealing with, we got to deal with these people. We've got to pull them back from the ledge, right? I know with a lot of our clients, we're hearing from them, they're telling us that their investors are saying, I want to go to cash. I don't want to be in the market anymore. Pull me out, right? They're calling in, they're furious. What's going on in my account? Why is my account value dropped? And they're so mad. And frankly, we see this. We see this when there's market turmoil, when there's market volatility, client complaints increase.
Right. Well, and I think to piggyback on that, it's even the uncertainty. So we've talked about fear and those things, and you mentioned uncertainty, but that's a huge part of of their decision making. That's a huge part of their self-talk. It's a huge part of them questioning, am I doing the right thing? Do I have the right advisor? Are they aggressive enough? Are they not as aggressive? And so that's a boon for me. It depends on, what the client's risk tolerance is. But being in that uncertain environment, human nature is to spin and to invent dialogue within ourselves, right? Those are the times that you're in the shower in the morning, washing your hair, whether it's externally where you're saying it to yourself in the room or you're just thinking it in your head. You can create whole arguments, whole scenarios, ways that you're going to interact with a person and have a whole series of things that in your mind are going to happen and how you're going to win the day. And you may never see that person all day, and you've wasted all of that time stewing about something that isn't happening. So uncertainty, a lot of times we try to fill in the gaps ourselves. And the problem with this type of uncertainty, and again, not politically, but more just human dynamics, when it's uncertainty with your livelihood, or if you're nearing retirement and there's uncertainty, or if you have any other factors that we humans have, whether it's going through a change with your life, maybe your lifestyle, your children, your working environment, your marriage, whatever it is that's happening in your life, that extra added uncertainty that seems like it could be a deterrent from the future that you want. All of these scenarios are probably playing in the client's head, and that leads them into a tailspin that winds up in your email inbox, at your door, on your phone, in your voicemail. And a lot of times they're coming at you in that vulnerable state. And so when people come at you in a vulnerable state and they're, having that high sensitivity and that high alert, what do you need to do?
I think first and foremost, advisors need to set the scene, right? Set the tone with clients and just be like, listen, guys, we're in for a ride. If you don't have the heart to go through this ride, don't even get on it. Let's just get you out of the market. Let's put you in cash. Let's put you in something conservative. I think you have to set up those conversations and set up the expectation, right? We always talk about managing expectations. Setting up the expectation to say, it's going to be rough, right? It's going to be rough from the perspective, not necessarily we're going to be in a recession and this, that, and the other, but there's going to be a lot of up and down, right? The current administration, they're wanting to really cut our debt. They want to cut unnecessary programs. We saw this creation of DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency. So that's going to create some impact in the market. It's going to either create hope or fear in the market. So I think first and foremost, advisors really need to set the tone and manage expectations with clients and be like, listen, we're in for a ride. Either get off or be prepared to stay on a ride that's going to have ups and downs like a roller coaster, right? We're going to go up, down, all around. There's 360 flips on this ride. Like that's going to happen. I think too, when there are significant changes, right? When we've seen the big drops, I think that's where advisors need to immediately get out communications to clients, identify who your nervous Nellies are and start picking up the phone and calling them. I think it's also an opportunity if you have clients who've always been, let's be real, pains in the ass, who always call you and they're always nervous and they're always double checking on you. This is an opportunity to dump them because they are the ones who are more likely to go to the SEC or your state regulator and file a complaint against you. They're the ones that are going to be more likely to potentially threaten litigation or other kind of legal threats against you. And you just want to show them the off-ramp and say, bye, enjoy the ride somewhere else. So take this as an opportunity, but I think communication is key. But I think the other part of, what advisors need to do is you got to remember we're in a service industry. We as lawyers, we sell legal services. Financial services, financial advisors are selling investment services, financial planning, investment management, etc. You are in a service industry. So serve. Start serving. Be a human. Have human conversations. Talk to your clients. Let them get their frustrations out. Talk them off the ledge. Tell them you're watching. But also remember, for many of advisors that may be listening, they're not market timers. They're not day traders. The strategy is to stay in long term and ride out the mountains and the valleys in the market. So remember who you are as an advisor too.
I think those are all great points. What I've kind of taken from that, Leila, and you can, jump in or add to, is number one is be the expert in the relationship. Make sure that you're managing expectations, make sure you're showing up. There is a level of confidence that can be gleaned from somebody else. It's almost contagious, just like being nervous is. If you've ever seen somebody go up to the Eiffel Tower, for example, you know the people that are scared of heights. But you also see them get closer to the ledge when they watch other people head over. So if you can have that expertise, if you can come from a place where you're being proactive instead of reactive and you show up as the expert, it's much harder for them not to stay with you during times of turbulence and trouble. 2, when we have volatility and significant changes in things, it's better to over communicate than under communicate. Making sure that we're identifying those clients that need a personal touch, that need a little extra TLC or hand holding. And then to your point, firing the clients that aren't a good fit, that you might have kept too long, that you've known you're supposed to or should do it for a long time. But whether it's that you didn't have the chutzpah, the guts, or just didn't make the decision to do it, now may be your time. And then number 3, when you talked about being in a service industry, I think, clearly, be the human, talk, serve the people, but listen to hear, don't listen to talk. That's a big one that I think all of us at different times are guilty of, where we're just hearing so that we can speak, right? We're just listening so that we can speak. We're not actually completely hearing or taking it in. And one of the things that I think tends to harm people in any service industry is when they're not listening to what the client's saying. And sometimes it's the unsaid words. It's the things in the pause that matter the most. And they aren't willing to be curious or dig in. And it might be because they're scared of what they'll find. Did I do something wrong? Is there somebody that's, if I dig in a little bit, is this relationship gonna collapse? Well, digging in allows them to know that you care, but it also allows you to understand them better, unearth things that are happening, maybe find reasons why they feel the way they feel so that you know how to help them get over that hurdle or hump. One of the things that somebody had told me early in my 20s, which was a minute ago, was that, oftentimes we're so concerned with what people are going to tell us that might negatively impact us when they're upset, that we just try to immediately counteract what they're saying, or we try to immediately dismiss what they're saying and talk about not how we're right, but how we're going to do it different or better. And instead of acknowledging them. And so, if this were a mountain that we were climbing, it'd be like them trying to climb the mountain and somebody shoving them down the mountain every time they approach it. And imagine that frustration building, that I can never make it, so that I can get both feet on the mountain to climb it. I get one hand up and start pulling myself and I fall down. What happens in those scenarios is they just start building pressure and frustration as you're talking at them instead of talking with them. And eventually, instead of being a mountain, it becomes a volcano and they explode. And just like with any volcano, it explodes all over everything in its path, which includes you. So instead, if you allow a person to voice their concerns, climb up that mountain and let them get to the peak of their frustration, and acknowledge what's going on with them. It doesn't mean that you have to acquiesce. It doesn't mean that you have to lay down and be like, everything you say, dear client, is right, and I'm just a dirty dog. There's nothing I can do to be better. But you can still acknowledge that that is how they're feeling. You can still acknowledge that it's understandable that based on what they're seeing, whether it be in the news, what they're hearing, what they're seeing on social media, all of those things would be stressful or frustrating or add fuel to the fire and make it troubling for most people. And when you acknowledge those things, not only do they end up getting to the top of the mountain, but they end up coming down the other side, almost like a luge or a slide, where they start getting up is much harder than going down. Anybody that's ever been on vacation knows that, when you're packing and trying to get there, it seems like you're never going to get there. But when you're coming home, it's like, how did the trip become so much shorter when the distance is the same, right? It's the same thing when I'm able to get all of that frustration and anger out and basically word vomit and have somebody else acknowledge that those are feelings that are okay that I feel and help me get over that hurdle. Then I start coming down and all of a sudden the anger starts to dissipate, and now I become more rational, more reasonable, somebody that's willing to engage in a different conversation, willing to hear things or suggestions you might have that would make me feel differently than when I came in. Letting somebody approach Anger Mountain, get up to it, acknowledge them, and then have the conversation about, now what do we do about it, so that we can regain some of our control on the downward slide, would change things completely. How do you, Leila, when you deal with clients or you deal with people that come in with guns a-blazing, how do you see it? Do you ever see them come in and be at that point of Anger Mountain where they're ready to explode?
Definitely have been there, done that. But I think to your point, you have to acknowledge their feelings. Sometimes, even if it's not your fault, just being like, I'm so sorry. I am sorry that this is the reaction. I'm sorry that this has been so upsetting and you've been so stressed. Even if it's not something you can control or even did to this person. I think a lot of people just want to feel heard, to your point. They want to vent, they want to get it out, and you're the financial advisor. Who else are they going to get out their frustration about the markets to? The person they're paying 1% or 2% to, right? Because that's going to be the next thing. The market's down, what am I paying you for? Right? And be like, you're absolutely right, but you're paying me to mitigate that loss. You're paying me to mitigate risk. You're paying me to keep my eye on the market, so when it does go down, I take defensive measures, and when it goes up, I make sure we're taking measures that benefit you. But we're also not market timers. We're also not fortune tellers. I don't have a magic ball I look into. And, if that's what you thought being a financial advisor was about, I'm sorry that you were misinformed, because that's not how it works. Our strategy is XYZ. So yeah, it can be really frustrating to look at your account. So don't look at it. That's my job. My job's to look at it. But if you need someone to talk to, I'm here for you, right? And I think that's where the personal relationship building comes too. I know you're upset because you were thinking about getting a divorce, or you've got a kid who's about to start college and now you're really worried about whether or not you're going to be able to pay for a college tuition. I get it. You just had a baby and you're freaking out about all your expenses have gone up with having a child. What does this mean for your ability to fund this child, or what you want to leave as a legacy to them? I think sometimes, to your point, is like, stop hearing someone so that you're just waiting for them to stop talking so you can say what you want to say, and take a little time to just be a human being with them. But now let's talk about the legal compliance side of things. Document the shit out of it, right? If you're having these conversations, you've talked them off the ledge, remind them of their investment profile. Reminding them like, hey, remember you said you were moderate, or you said you were aggressive. Remember we talked about the makeup of the portfolio. Is this not true anymore? Is that not what you want? Oh no, that is what you want? Okay, well that means we've got to deal with this. We got to suffer through. And then you CYA, cover your ass, and you send a follow-up email. You document in your CRM the notes related to that conversation, because people forget very easily.
Oh, yes, they do. That's why anybody that's seen Law and Order SUV, if you've seen any of those shows that are on there, they'll refresh the witness's memory, right? Because you could have 5 people look at the same accident that happened on the street and they all explain it differently, right? And then over time, their idea of what happened gets warped by other things they see, other things they hear, other conversations they have, hopes, desires, dreams. Sometimes it's magical thinking, sometimes it's stinking thinking. But those things start to resonate and they become part of the story, even though they weren't ever part of the original tale. That's why a game of telephone is so fun when you're little. You can start out saying that you saw a hippo in a bikini with a beach ball, and by the end of it, it's a pink elephant in the bathroom, right? And you're like, how did we get there? You know, we all were talking to each other. You would think it would be conveyed so much easier, but what we remember when we're happy, when we're sad, when we are frustrated, when there's volatility, when there's emotion, it's very different than reality oftentimes. That's why there's 2 sides to every story and the truth is probably in the middle. But the way to combat that is to have documentation, so that if somebody remembers the conversation differently, if one of the parties ends up being upset over something, assuming or read into the conversation, you have the facts. And because there's metadata and there's all of the things that if you ever get into litigation or anything like that, it'll show that at the time that you had the discussion or around the period, these were the notes. These were a great reflection or a memorialization of what we discussed. There are many times that I'll send emails internally and externally, whether it's to one of our employees or to one of our clients, that says, I just want to memorialize our conversation. If anything in this email needs to be adjusted or added, if I've missed something, please let me know. And it gives them an opportunity to add to the narrative as well. But that way we have a record. It's not my impression of what's happened. It's not their impression of what's happened. It's what we both have an opportunity to see and add to. And if they don't, then that's what it is.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So, I think what we're telling people is, obviously get ahead of things, communicate, set the tone for not just what's happening today or not just what happened this week, but manage the expectations on a longer term basis. Listen, this is a presidency that is looking to make decisions that for some people it's very unpopular, right? That are going to have short-term and long-term effects. We don't necessarily know all the effects of these different decisions this administration's making. So be prepared for volatility. Be prepared for ups and downs. I always go back to COVID. I remember when a lot of the states kind of shut down and we're all quarantining to beat the curve. And, the markets crashed and you had basically 2 buckets of advisors. The ones who were like, sell, 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 and the ones that were like, hold. And then the markets bounced back very shortly after that. So the ones who held were like, yay, if anything, it bounced back and up more. And then the people who sell, they're like, fuck, right? These clients just had all these realized losses and now they're pissed off. And how do I know? Because I got a lot of calls from advisors around that time about how do I handle these pissed off people. So I think too, when we're talking to clients, and we're talking to investors, individual retail investors specifically, going back in time to specific events that are still relatively fresh, like COVID, and reminding them, remember this? Remember when this happened? How would you have felt if we had responded by doing this? How would you have felt if we responded by doing this? We didn't know what was going to happen with COVID. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know we weren't going to beat the damn curve, right? but we don't have that magic ball to look in the future and tell us what's happening. So I think if you use examples of why they should hold on or whatever your advice may be to the client, I think that's a helpful illustration as well. So set the scene, communicate, over communicate, take this as an opportunity to dump your F&D clients, take this opportunity to dump clients that are just not a good fit, make a referral to someone who is. You know, I know a lot of advisors are doing AUM fees with the market volatility, revenues drop too. Do a good thing. If they're not a fit for you, refer them to someone who's going to be a good fit. I will also tell you there is a lot of advisors out there who aren't communicating, who've dug a hole and dipped their head into it. And their clients are like, where's my advisor? And now they're looking for someone new. There's no shortage of work or clients looking for financial advisors. So take this as an opportunity. How can you add more value? How can you communicate with your clients? How can you provide resources and education to them to help them think about how they can get through this time frame? They don't give a fuck about you. They give a fuck about themselves. They don't care how great of an advisor you are or how correct you were. They care about what you're doing for them. I have losses. I don't care if you were the #1 wealth manager in the state. What are you doing for me to fix the situation? And that's where you need to focus on. Don't give them the bullshit of, I'm great, we've been together for 20 years. People break up after 20 years. I've seen best friends who've been friends since childhood break up over business and stop being friends and go after each other in litigation over business.
Marriages break up after 20 or 30 years. You can't tell me that you're as intimate as they are. So I think one other point before we sign off is get extra brownie points from your clients. You're doing the work, you're having the conversations, you're listening at this point, because these are all things that we've suggested, and I know you're going to take all of the tips. But you've done all this stuff. Now document it, write notes, send yourself tasks or calendar reminders. I remember years and years ago, before I was a lawyer, I was a banker. And one of the things I did was, if a client said to me, oh gosh, this year my daughter turned 16. You bet I asked questions. I got curious. I found out why that was a stressor for him, what the reason was that he brought that up to me when I was discussing it with the client, so that I could put it in my database. I could put it in my calendar. And before the child turned 16, I sent them a card and said, oh, I remember Sarah's going to turn 16 in a couple months. I bet you guys are out looking for cars. Guess what? We have a deal coming. You better believe the next time they were in, they were like, I can't believe you remembered it's Sarah's birthday. It just made them feel like that rapport we had built, those meaningful conversations we had, they weren't the only ones in it. I was there with them. And because of that, and because I knew about them, and because I remembered, it really cemented with them that I was somebody that cared about them and what was going to happen in their life and with their family. So utilize what you know. Work smart, not hard.
Amen. Amen to that. So lots of great tips. I'm not even going to say tricks, because none of these are tricks. They're just great tips. And then, of course, you always want to protect yourself and your business. So making sure you're documenting these interactions. But, listen, utilize the tools you have at your disposal, right? Call, email. If you have a tool like Constant Contact, post things on your website. Keep your clientele up to date. You'll keep them moving through this time of volatility, and make sure that you protect your business and mitigate potential risk as a result. So, Tracie, any final words?
Yes. Keep listening. Find us wherever you find your podcast. It could be Apple, it could be Spotify, it could be anywhere you get a podcast, but come listen to us. There's going to be more great information down the road, things that you can put in your back pocket and throw out when you need them. So look at our website, www.myralawyer.com. Go to our YouTube. There's so much out there, so many resources, so many things that can help you in your business and with your compliance needs. Get signed up for our newsletter. There's always stuff that's coming out of that. We have over 50,000 firms and advisors that are getting that newsletter, sending us great feedback. There are things out there that you can do that are going to help you every step of the way, and most of them are there for the taking. So do your best, find those things, and come back to us, and we're always going to be giving you solid advice and feedback of things that you can do to elevate the experience for your clients and for you.
Thanks for listening to Regulate This, a really unfiltered podcast. Take care, everyone.